I worked for a small engineering firm in the 80s, and believe it or not, one of the products I worked on was a concept virtual reality porta-potty. It was supposed to be the next big thing in portable sanitation technology. The idea was to create an immersive experience that would make users forget they were actually using a porta-potty. We ended up spending months designing the software, creating a virtual world that was as realistic as possible. For the time, the graphics were cutting edge, and we were all excited to see the final product. The day finally came when we were ready to test the prototype. I volunteered to be the first person to use it. As I stepped inside and closed the door, I was transported to a serene forest setting. The sounds of birds chirping and a gentle breeze filled my ears. It was so convincing that I almost forgot where I was. But then as I sat down, I heard a faint whisper. At first I thought it was just the wind, but the voice grew louder and more insistent. "Help me," it pleaded. I looked around, but there was no one else in the virtual world. I tried to ignore it and focus on my task, but the voice continued to grow louder and more desperate. "Please, you have to help me," it begged. I stood up and tried to exit the porta-potty, but the door wouldn't budge. I was trapped inside with the voice. Panic set in as I realized that something was very wrong. Suddenly, the virtual world began to glitch and distort. The once beautiful forest turned dark and twisted. The voice became a cacophony of screams and moans, and I could feel something clawing at my mind, trying to drag me into the darkness. I screamed and pounded on the door, desperate to escape, but it was no use. I was trapped in the virtual nightmare, with no way out. As the last of my sanity slipped away, I realized that we had created something far more sinister than we ever intended. The virtual reality porta-potty was a gateway to a world of horror, and I was its first victim. For a while as a kid, my friends and I found porta-potties to be absolutely hilarious. I can't even explain why. Sometimes when we'd go to our neighborhood park, we'd look for them and dare each other to go inside while the rest of us banged on the outside. It was all in good fun, or so we thought. One summer evening, we were at the park, and as usual, we found a porta-potty. My friend Jake was the one who got the dare that night. He went inside, and we started banging on the door, laughing and shouting. Then suddenly Jake's screams pierced through our laughter. We stopped, and I tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. We could hear Jake struggling and crying for help. Panicked, we ran to the nearest house and called the police. They arrived quickly and managed to break open the door, but what they found inside was horrifying. Jake was on the floor, his face contorted in fear, and his body covered in a strange, glowing substance. The police tried to help him, but it was too late. Whatever had happened to Jake had messed him up, and he didn't want to talk about it. He was also never the same after that. Me personally, I never went near a porta-potty again. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I tried to forget this whole experience, but the memory of Jake's screams haunted me. Years later, I still can't shake the feeling of dread whenever I see a porta-potty. I know there's something wrong with them, something that can't be explained by science or reason, and I know that one day it will come for me, just like it came for Jake. For about 10 years, I worked in a factory that made, among other things, portable toilets. I know, it wasn't exactly glamorous, but it was actually a good place to work. That is, until one day. The shift started off normal, and I was working on assembling the plastic walls of the porta-potties when I heard a scream from the other side of the factory. I ran over to see what was happening, and what I saw made my blood run cold. One of the porta-potties had come to life. It was moving on its own, walking around the factory floor. The workers were running in terror as the porta-potty chased them, its door opening and closing like a hungry mouth. I couldn't actually believe what I was seeing. I had worked on these porta-potties for years, and now one of them was alive? It was like something out of a nightmare. The porta-potty cornered one of my coworkers, a young woman named Sarah. It opened its door and swallowed her whole. I could hear her screams, but could only imagine what was going on inside. I knew I had to do something. I grabbed a crowbar from a nearby workbench and ran towards the porta-potty. I swung the crowbar at it, but it bounced off the plastic walls like they were made of steel. Then the porta-potty turned its attention to me. It started moving towards me, its door opening and closing menacingly. I backed away, but it was too fast. It was going to eat me too. Just as it was about to swallow me, a group of my coworkers came to my rescue. They had found a way to shut down the porta-potty's power source and fell to the ground, lifeless. Thank God that me and Sarah were alright. After that day, I never looked at a porta-potty the same way again. I knew that something had gone horribly wrong in the factory, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there were more like it out there, waiting to come to life and wreak havoc. I quit my job at the factory soon after that. I couldn't stand the thought of working with those porta-potties again. But, no matter where I went, I could never really escape the memory of that day, and the fear that something like it could happen again.